Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
I remember it all too well. It was one of the hottest summers we'd ever had, the kind where just stepping outside felt like you were walking into an oven. My best friend, she lived in the same neighborhood for years. You couldn't find a person around who didn't know her or her husband, especially him. He was a deputy, and a well-liked one at that. Everyone recognized him because he drove a marked car, and he wasn't just any cop. You could tell he cared about people. He'd been there long enough that if you lived nearby, you'd probably seen him a dozen times. At least. Then came the accident. It was all over the news. Helicopters flying over the area, and then the crash. He didn't make it. It was one of those surreal moments when you're just stuck in disbelief. The kind that hits hard and makes you feel like the world's upside down. When a deputy dies in the line of duty, their home becomes this gathering place. Friends, family, coworkers, everyone wants to come by, offer support, help however they can. It's just what happens, a kind of unspoken thing. You'd see marked cars lined up, deputies standing outside, ready to lend a hand, or just stand there in case she needed anything. People brought food, water, set up tents because, honestly, the heat was unbearable. At least 4 patrol cars were parked outside at any given time. It was like a small crowd that never left. There was this flow of people constantly coming in and out, and nobody wanted to leave her alone. She needed it, too. It was just too much to bear all by herself. It was a sea of grief and support all at once. Then came that damn letter. I don't know if they waited for the worst possible moment or if they're just that blind to what's happening around them. But either way, it was awful. The HOA had the nerve to send her a warning. The letter wasn't about some big violation or anything like that. No, it was about her trash cans being visible from the street. Some new rule they must have pulled out of thin air, and they sent it to her right when her life had just fallen apart. It wasn't like her house was some eyesore. In the picture they sent, you could see the trash cans. Sure, but you could also see a bunch of deputies in uniform standing there, offering their support. The whole scene was insane. People in mourning, and there's this petty complaint about trash cans. Trash cans! She got that letter on the day of his funeral, the very same day. I'll never forget her reaction, because she was already hanging by a thread. We were trying to help her get through the funeral, and then she opens that envelope and just snaps. She tore that paper into tiny pieces, flung them into the air like confetti, and she just lost it. Who wouldn't, though? Her husband was gone. Her whole world had collapsed. And these people were more concerned about trash cans than what was happening right in front of them. It was like the last straw, the one thing that pushed her over the edge. I don't blame her for ripping it up. It wasn't just about trash cans. It was about the complete lack of empathy. They didn't even stop to think. I was standing there, watching her break down, and it was like this wave of anger washed over everyone who was there. The deputies, the friends, the neighbors who actually cared, they all knew how wrong this was. But there was nothing we could do in that moment except stand there and try to calm her down. And then, out of nowhere, Home Depot steps in. I guess word spread pretty quickly about what happened because, a few days later, this team shows up and starts building her a fence. They didn't ask for money, didn't ask for anything in return. They just showed up with their trucks and their tools, and they built that fence to hide her trash cans. It was like, finally, someone got it. Someone understood that this wasn't the time to be nitpicking about stupid rules. This was a time to help her, to do something meaningful when she needed it most. But, of course, the HOA couldn't just let it go. Even after that, they kept sending letters. You'd think after everything, they'd take a step back and just leave her alone. But no, they kept on. I don't know who was in charge of that HOA, but they had some serious control issues. They sent more warnings, more complaints, like she was some kind of neighborhood menace. It was unbelievable. Trash cans were their big concern while she was dealing with the loss of her husband. Really, at that point, she had no choice but to get a lawyer involved. She couldn't take it anymore, and when she did, things started to shift. The HOA had been getting away with this nonsense for far too long. They had all these little rules that nobody paid attention to until suddenly they decided to enforce them like tyrants. Her lawyer wasn't playing around either. He came in swinging, and I guess the HOA wasn't prepared for the backlash because they started losing power fast. It wasn't just about her at that point, either. Other neighbors started coming forward with their own stories. Turns out, the HOA had been harassing a lot of people, nitpicking, fining, controlling every little thing they could. They'd been like a shadow hanging over the neighborhood, but nobody wanted to stand up to them until now. My friend's case opened the floodgates. People were fed up, and her lawyer made sure the HOA knew they'd crossed the line. I remember sitting in on one of the meetings where her lawyer laid it all out. He didn't hold back. The board members just sat there, shifting in their seats, looking uncomfortable, like they suddenly realized they were way out of their league. But still, even with everything laid bare, they had the nerve to try and defend themselves. They acted like they were doing the right thing, like their stupid trash can rule was worth all the pain they'd caused. It was unreal. The best part, though, was when her lawyer started talking about the fence. But that wasn't the only thing the HOA had done to her, not by a long shot. They'd been after her for months, even before the accident. But after her husband died, it was like they turned up the heat. There was the issue with her garden. For one, she'd always loved tending to her flowers and plants. It was her escape, a way to feel close to nature, and her husband used to help her with it too. But the HOA decided one day that her flower beds didn't match the aesthetic of the neighborhood. They sent her letters saying her choice of plants wasn't approved, and they fined her for having what they called unauthorized landscaping. It was absurd. Who gets fined for having a few flowers? But they didn't care. They were relentless, and they hit her with fines one after another, all for something as simple and innocent as a flower bed. Then there was the whole issue with the memorial wreath she put up after her husband passed. It wasn't some huge, gaudy thing, just a small wreath with his badge number and a couple of ribbons on her front door. A tribute, really. But no, the HOA wasn't having that either. They said it violated the neighborhood's decorative guidelines. Can you believe that? A wreath, a symbol of mourning, was apparently too offensive for their precious guidelines. They sent her a notice, telling her she had to take it down, threatening more fines if she didn't comply. It was like they had zero understanding of what she was going through, or they just didn't care. Then, to top it all off, they actually complained about the visitors. The people who were there to support her during the hardest time of her life. They had the audacity to say it was disruptive to the neighborhood. They sent letters about the number of cars parked on the street, about the gatherings, like it was some sort of rager going on. They didn't even stop to consider that those people were law enforcement officers, there to honor a fallen deputy. The HOA just saw it as an inconvenience, something that didn't fit into their perfect little world. Her lawyer laid all of this out during the meeting, line by line, every heartless action they'd taken against her. By the time he was done, it was crystal clear to everyone in the room what the HOA had become. They weren't just enforcing rules, they were harassing her, plain and simple. And when the lawyer brought up the fence, how Home Depot had to come out and build it because the HOA refused to back down on something so petty, it was the final nail in the coffin for them. What could they say? That trash cans, flowers, a wreath, and support from the community were all violations worth hounding a widow over? They had no way to defend themselves, not after everything they'd done. The whole ordeal took a toll on her, though. It's not like getting a lawyer and fighting back fixed everything. She still had to live with the memories, with the loss of her husband, and on top of that, she had to deal with the ridiculousness of the HOA. Even after they lost a lot of their power, they still stuck around, still poking their noses into people's business. That's just how HOAs are, I guess. Once they get their claws in, they don't let go. But at least, after all that, she wasn't fighting alone anymore. The neighbors rallied around her. They stood up to the HOA, pushed back on the nonsense, and things started to change. People stopped being afraid of speaking out. They realized they didn't have to live under the thumb of some overbearing board that cared more about trash cans than the people living in the community. It's wild to think about how something as simple as a trash can could cause so much trouble. But that's the reality of HOAs. They don't care about people. They care about rules, about control. They don't see the human side of things. I'll never forget what they put her through, all over something that should have never mattered in the first place. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Sadly, however, it shouldn't take screwing with a cop's widow to castrate an HOA because, you know damn well that if that had happened to anybody else, the HOA wouldn't have had jack shit done to it. Also, just to be clear, none of my vitriol is directed at you. It is all meant for HOAs because they are pieces of shit, in every possible sense of the word. Mid-Florida here. We moved there from Georgia in 2019 not knowing much and bought new construction lender in an HOA. Worst decision ever. Shitty build quality, shitty neighborhood full of people with nothing better to do than be in everyone else's business. Fortunately sold in 2022 and went just outside city limits to a small neighborhood built in the 70s. Best decision ever. Funnily enough, we even got an HOA notice with pictures stating our real estate agent's for sale sign was a violation and would be fined if we didn't remove it. Our agent said don't move it as she's been selling homes in the area for 40 years and would be happy to fight it with her agency. Fortunately, the house sold in 5 days and we were on our merry way. There are parts of the country where the local city or town government is either non-existent, unincorporated land, or so ineffective that they can't provide services to every resident in the town. You'll have massive real estate developers who buy up huge plots of land and build new roads and dozens or even hundreds of new homes. And the town either can't or doesn't want to provide services like trash pickup, snow plowing, pothole repair, or basic landscaping and maintenance of public spaces. The developer will create the HOA and contractually mandate that all the homes in the neighborhood be part of the HOA. And you must accept that if you want to buy one of the homes. Once it's established, it doesn't go away, and that opens the possibility for scope creep, where the HOA board can vote to increase their own power. Opens it up to the possibility of abuse, just like any other bureaucracy.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.